You're listening to the Journey podcast. Can embracing your sexual empowerment lead to greater well-being? Learn more in today's episode. This episode contains adult subject matter, and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we delve into the important and often misunderstood topic of female empowerment in intimate relationships. Our guest, an experienced therapist, provides a behind-the-scenes look at the kinds of questions and concerns that bring people to seek professional guidance. We explore the significance of addressing these issues and the transformative power that comes from understanding and embracing one's own desires and needs and communicating those in a relationship. Russo is a psychotherapist, author, and mental health advocate with an MA in Theology from Loyola Marymount and an MSW for Long Beach State. She founded AMR Therapy in 2018 to provide culturally sensitive mental health services to queer communities and other communities that have been cut off from safe and affirming mental health access. AMR has served over 1,500 clients with an amazing team of just 15 therapists and administrators. Anne is trained in domestic violence and sexual assault advocacy, trauma-informed care, and first responder crisis management. She's currently developing specialized continuing education units for therapists, which are crucial for professionals looking to enhance their understanding and skills around sex and sexuality. The CEUs focus on critical topics such as ethical non-monogamy, sexual empowerment, religious trauma, and queerness, equipping therapists to better serve diverse populations. She also offers consulting services to mental health providers around these topics. Her upcoming book, Her Own Terms, explores modern female sexuality through cognitive behavioral therapy, sex-positive perspectives, and psychodynamic insights. Raised in a queer, non-monogamous household, Anne's personal and professional experiences enrich her approach, making her a relatable and insightful figure in the mental health field. She is actively featured in articles, podcasts, and interviews, advocating for mental health and sexual positivity. Let's meet Anne Russo. Hi, Anne. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because female sexual empowerment is such a fascinating topic for our conversation today. I don't think we've ever talked about that on the podcast before, so I'm really excited to dive in. So welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here as well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And for starters, do you want to share a little bit about yourself and your own story and actually how you got into all of this and what you do today?
Sure. I am a mental health therapist and a consultant for mental health providers. I got into this because I grew up in a very unique household, Petra. When I was growing up, I was raised in a household with my father, his male partner, and my mom. And in that household, I learned a lot about male sexuality, whether or not right or wrong. Objectively, this is what was going on. And I spent my teen years just living with my dad and his partner. So I was kind of inundated with what it meant to be a sexual male being. And I thought that that's kind of what I was supposed to emulate. So my own experience was really a journey because I went from viewing sexuality this way and then coming into my own idea of what it meant for me as a female to be sexually empowered. And then being a queer female, being sexually empowered as well. From my own life experience, from working with clients, from friends, I've learned a lot about the female sexual experience. And I've learned a lot about the male idea of sexual experience and how those two things sometimes don't always align beautifully. Sometimes they do. So I think I got some unique insights, and having a lot of male friends growing up and speaking very candidly, I feel like I was really blessed to have just this amazing view around sex and sexuality.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that actually is a very interesting upbringing that you had to get to view all these different parts of it. I feel like sometimes we grow up quite sheltered, and all of a sudden there's this big world that we encounter where we don't quite know where we fit or what is even happening. So I love that you have that insight. And what kind of challenges do women bring to your therapy? I'm kind of sitting here imagining, what would we discuss if we were in therapy and we were talking about female sexuality? What happens in these sessions? I am so curious. What do you talk about?
It's interesting because being a queer female and having had exploration with various genders growing up, but landing in this place with a female life partner, I was able to get some additional insights. So for therapy, one of the main things that I've really learned is that there is a lot of pressure on women to perform, even if they're not in the mood to perform. I have clients that will come in, couples clients. A lot of times these will be male-female couples, but sometimes they'll be female-female couples. And one partner, the female, has a lower sex drive. And that becomes a huge issue in the therapy session. What's wrong with her? Why is her sex drive so low? What's wrong with me? I need to have a higher sex drive. What can I do to get there? Do I need to take medicine? Do I need to do this? It's an automatic that she's the problem, rather than saying, maybe that's just how I'm built. Maybe I don't have a high sex drive. Maybe I don't have a high sex drive at this moment. There's an automatic blame on the person with the lower sex drive. Granted, there may be other elements and other factors going on, and that is appropriate to explore those things in therapy. But I don't think that we should start from the place of you're the wrong one. And that is tremendous. The other issue that I see is, and I've seen this more stereotypically, I've seen this more around male-female couples. The female will tend to have sex when she doesn't want to, will feel like it's an obligation for her to have sex and to do whatever it is that the man needs to do in order to have an orgasm, leaving her own pleasure aside. What I'm trying to teach women is what it means for them to have enthusiastic consent. This is what I want to be doing. This is how I want to be doing it. And to not feel shame around their own desires, and to be able to share that with their partner and exploring their own body and feeling safe in their own body in order to make that happen. So those are some key elements that I'm seeing within therapy. There's a lot of moving pieces for individuals, but when we're looking at the dynamic with another person, those are the two main things that I see.
That's really impactful what you're sharing there, because when I think of that from a female perspective, I'm not quite sure that that is very supportive and very healthy for our mental and emotional and even physical well-being, to have these pressures. And we're already usually in situations where we have a lot of pressure with work and family and finances and everything else that goes on. And to not have that safe space with your partner physically and emotionally in that situation makes me really sad. Is this a societal thing? Is this something part of just how we are brought up? Or where does this come from that women feel like they should put their own pleasures and health sort of behind or below that of their male partner?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Petra, because I'm writing a book on this topic. And the things what I talk about first is why. Why is this the case? Being here in the US, but I think this could apply very well to any country that has a Christian background, Catholic background, really comes out of that foundational religion. In this particular chapter, I look at the writings of the church fathers, the formation of the church, the beliefs around women, the beliefs around certain women of the Bible, and how there's this parallel of the Virgin Mary being upheld a certain way versus Eve. And I talk about how these dichotomies really have impacted the way that we view women from thousands of years ago. And it's just been in our culture, seeped in so deeply that we don't even realize that we are living and breathing this sexual misogyny around women. I'm not saying it's, oh, we're horrible people, this is a horrible person. No, this is just what's happened. And then I talk about specifically to the US, the view of female sexuality culturally from the 1950s until now, and kind of the movement that's happened around that. This is our history. This is our joint history.
Wow.
The less than, the woman less than.
And that goes very deep.
Oh, it goes
such a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, when you read some of the early writings of the church, women are looked at as the dirt on the ground who are trying to tempt men sexually. So we're already viewed as this like horrible creature of temptation. And then we just add the layers on top of that. And we can see it in our history. If you just even look at when women got the right to vote in the US or property of their husband, this is just what this has looked like. What I'm hoping for is that we're at a stage in our society where we can talk about female sexual empowerment and what that means for women to have a voice in her own pleasure.
Yeah, very, very important. Actually, just a few weeks ago, I saw a post online and it said, ladies, go and spend something, use your credit cards, because this is the 50th anniversary of women being allowed to have credit cards in their own name. So if you think 50 years, that's not even one generation when that changed. It's absolutely floored me that it's been such a short time where we had to fight so hard for these basic things. And now we're talking about our own bodies. I mean, if you look at what is also happening in the US and around all of that, I'm not feeling very comforted by all of that or very supported in the female sexual empowerment. So when people come to you for therapy around that, where do you start with them? I mean, there's probably a lot of fear and anxiety and guilt around that because people may feel like they might lose their marriages over this if they speak out or if they rock the boat or anything like that. So where do you even start with something that goes so deep and has such a huge effect on our lives?
If I'm working with an individual, that will look different than if I'm working with a couple. If it's an individual, I like to go deep. Where do they learn messages around sexuality? What was their household like? Did families speak about sexuality? How did they learn about sexuality? I go at the pace of which the client can go because, like you said, there's a lot of shame in even saying vagina or penis, just saying the words. My goal is to just help someone get comfortable with saying the word sex. So whatever that takes to get us there, that's what we do. It can be a very slow process, but the goal is for someone to not have shame around their body and shame around sexuality. And they may get to a place where they're comfortable exploring their own body. And I think that's a great place. Then we work on communication. In therapy with couples, there's a lot that actually happens around communicating. So I don't necessarily jump into like, so how's your sex life? It's something that will come up, but we get into a place where they feel comfortable speaking to each other about other things that may have been difficult. So it's so much about the communication. And then I help facilitate the conversation around sex and sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
So much of this comes down to personal shame, family of origin, and lack of communication skills. So that's what we're doing there.
And do you find that when those things are addressed and when women actually learn how to speak up for themselves, how to work through that guilt, how to communicate with their partner, is there a basis that comes from which you can go and kind of strengthen that relationship? Or do you find that it can also break that relationship because the other party doesn't understand?
There so far has not been a couple that has broken up due to this.
That's very comforting.
Yeah. Yeah. I have actually found that their partners tend to be very receptive and understanding. And that just might be the fact that they're willing to be in therapy together to talk about this. I can't speak for the rest of the population, but I do find that once they learn how to communicate together better, they are willing to hear each other and explore what a healthy sexual relationship looks like for them. Speaking of the male-female dynamic, the men don't learn how to do this either. I find that the men that I've worked with want to give pleasure to their partners in general. They just don't know how. And the women aren't telling them that this isn't working for me. So they're just as lost, but they think they're fabulous and amazing. But it's because of, again, that lack of communication. It's female sexual empowerment, but it's about sexual empowerment of a society.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, actually, because we're not really given manuals or instructions on any of this. So I can see this being difficult if the communication isn't there. The other party might not even know what is happening and can't even do anything about it. So that part is a really important piece of building that foundation that you can go forward from.
Absolutely. And when you're taught, I don't know what it's like in other places, but there's so much shame around sexuality in the US that we would just as soon watch the most violent movie with our 7-year-old child, but then have shame and guilt, and we can't watch sex, and this is bad, this is naughty. What kind of message is that telling a child about a natural process? We need to teach our children appropriately that this is normal, this is natural. What does enthusiastic consent look like? What does it look like to ask for enthusiastic consent? We have to teach everybody about healthy sexuality because these kids are getting their information online and they're seeing things that are not accurate about sexual intimacy. And stats are showing that they're going into these sexual relationships in a really unhealthy place, both men and women, or kids, teens, as they're exploring. And we're not doing a good job in our society to respect, to teach, and to honor our bodies and to honor our pleasure and enthusiastic consent. Not, I think, okay, maybe, yeah, I feel like I have to do this. True consent, where you can own your own pleasure.
And do you find that these challenges exist to the same degree in relationship with same-sex partners and in relationships with male-female partners? Or do you find that there are different challenges in different relationships?
Different.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, I oftentimes will say, therapists, don't say you work with same-sex couples unless you really have the experience of working with same-sex couples, because it's not the same. What I have found, and having been in all these kind of situations, I find that gay men in general, again, these are going to be some stereotypes. In general, men have an easier time separating emotion and sex. So there are definitely dynamics and issues in the gay male community around sex, and there is pressure around having to perform a certain way, always be ready for sex. So there's pressure in that community as well. The men have more ability to control their sexual experience, not necessarily all the time, but they know what they like. They know it's pleasurable to them. They can just do it and leave the situation and they're fine. With women, it's definitely much more emotional sex. So with the same sex with women, I mean, there is the joke that I think is decades old. What do you bring on the second date? A U-Haul. That's like a huge little joke over here. But women attach emotionally easier through sex, and that's chemical. That's not positive, negative. Again, it's just fact. We have chemical reactions that are different. In male-female couples, and this really surprised me. I was just taken aback. Even talking to my friends when I was younger, I'm like, what? How much women just have sex to please their husbands or their boyfriends. I was shocked they have no desire to have sex. They haven't been warmed up to have sex. What it takes for their body to be ready to have sex does not happen. And it's a chore. And that's really unfortunate. And the men don't know that's happening. I feel like those experiences help guide me, but I would say my main focus is to empower women generally, but really women that are in relationships with opposite gender, because they seem to have the harder time because all their friends are doing this too. And I hear them talking. I hear my friends, the quiet conversations with each other about how they're just giving in to something they don't really want. And it's just completely accepted. Oh, my husband wanted to have sex. Oh, God. Oh, it's that time of month again. Once a week on Tuesday when I'm really tired after the kids. And that's horrible. That's a horrible, horrible thing. I want those women to feel empowered to say yes, to say no, and to tell their husbands, their partners, this is what it means for me to have pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on some of the pieces there, but from a well-being perspective, if we consider mental, emotional, physical well-being, what does female sexual empowerment look like? What are some of the pieces that you would think are sort of the non-negotiables of that? What is your take on that?
Well, I went to an amazing conference where we actually talked about the physiological and the biological aspects of female sexuality. Women are really built to have connection, and pleasure comes from connection. So even if it can be the same physical stimulus, but if you have that in different scenarios, it may be like the most horrible turnoff ever versus something that's very exciting for you. So a safe space for a woman is everything. It has to be where she feels safe. Everyone's going to be different, obviously, but where she feels safe, where she feels excited, where she feels open to the idea of sex. So empowerment is understanding those things about yourself. Empowerment is being able to, when it's hard, and it is hard, to say, I don't want this right now, or to say, this is what I want, and learning how to do that. And we learn how to do that through various exercises and practices and things that take time that actually have nothing to do with sex at all. It will just show up in how you're having your sexual relationship. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And you know what? It actually seems to me that when we can go through those experiences and we can voice what we want and don't want, it can create a whole other intimate level in our relationships that maybe previously wasn't even there. So it sounds like we can utilize that to really deepen our relationships.
Oh, absolutely. When you can create true, authentic intimacy where both people want to be there, and not only want to be there, but can be really present in the joy and pleasure. And this was said in the training, and I just really value this. Sex should be also fun and playful. This should be about joy, not duty. It should be about connection. And that may mean different things to different relationship types, because it's, when I say empowerment, I'm talking about whatever truly works for that person, whether they want to have a different partner every day or they don't want a partner at all. Whatever works for that person, and to be authentic in that. That's what I'm out here preaching.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for giving us that kind of look behind the therapy door, because I'm sure that, like myself, many listeners were curious on what this all even means. If you are a woman, what does this empowerment look like to you? And what could you even talk about when you would go see a therapist? But I think what we can leave our listeners with is a sense that it definitely is worth it, and it can make a huge difference in your relationships when you learn to communicate, to express, to trust, to create the safe space that you might want for that. I think that feels to me a lot better than what we talked about in the beginning, where it's like you can't have those things because for centuries it's been like that, and you can just accept and move forward. So yeah, thank you for sharing all of that and for giving us this hope and this insight that it can be different and we can be part of something different.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. I am so happy to share it. And I really hope that your listeners take something away from that too, to be empowered in themselves.
Yeah. As we're closing the episode, tell us a little bit about your book and how this will help listeners once that comes out. And how do you work with people? Obviously, you work one-on-one in therapy, but do you offer any programs or any group programs? How can listeners connect with you?
I just started a small group for female sexual empowerment. The current group is full, but if it's something that people really enjoy, I am open to running this group all the time. And that would be through Zoom. And anyone's welcome to join this group. It doesn't have to be someone who's in therapy. It doesn't have to be someone who feels comfortable even talking about sex. This is just a space to begin these discussions. I also am a therapist, but I also will provide coaching around sex and sexuality to people that are outside my licensing jurisdiction. And I also do continuing education units around sex and sexuality for mental health providers. So I'm out there doing my thing and really hoping that this information will help empower mental health providers and just people in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Give us a little glimpse of your book. What is it going to be about?
So the book is going to be some personal stuff interweaved in there of how I got to this place. So I go a little bit deeper into that, my own experiences. And I discuss some history, but the main pieces are looking at 3 different therapy modalities: psychodynamic, cognitive behavioral, and sex positive therapy, and how you can use those therapies to work on your own female sexual empowerment. And I do have exercises and questions and resources in that book, and clearly like takeaways on how to start moving forward in those things, even if it's just a little step at a time.
Amazing. And of course, we will be linking to all of Anne's offerings in the show notes as well. So you can check there on how you can work with her, how you can join the group if you'd like to. And you're going to have to be a little bit more patient for the book to come out, but hopefully we'll have Anne back when her book is launching and then we can talk about that some more. But we'll keep you posted on when that happens. And this has been another incredible episode, and I really hope our listeners have enjoyed our journey into female sexual empowerment. What a great conversation, and I have learned so much in our exchange over the past half hour. So thank you so much for coming on today and talking about that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And can't wait to have you back. We'll dive into your book. So thank you so much, Anne. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care.
Thank you, Petra.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejourney.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.